Fala galera, tudo bem com vocês? Um vídeo repercutiu bastante na gringa nessas últimas semanas, que foi um vídeo do canal Platum, que é especialista em estatísticas do Valorant, e ele fez uma análise profunda dos dados de 2023 para determinar de forma técnica quem teria sido o melhor jogador de Valorant do ano. E no vídeo ele destaca jogadores como Aspas, Les e Calmanzin. Então entramos em contato com ele para trazer alguns trechos desse vídeo legendado aqui para vocês. Então já deixa aquele like nesse vídeo, confere se está inscrito aqui no canal e vamos lá ver como ficou.
I don't think Leo is the best player in the world now. In terms of impact for me, I don't think Leo brings as much impact as like Alpha and like Aspas, like less.
So is Boostio right or wrong? And if Leo isn't the best player in the world despite his monstrous rating, then who is? And how can we more accurately determine the best player if rating and KD don't cut it? In this video, we're going to answer all those questions and more by analyzing better statistics, which can tell us more about the impact of a player instead of just how many kills they're getting. Using all the data from VCT Champs and Masters this year, I'm going to compare the best players in the world on their actual game-to-game impact, using a variety of methods. By the end of this video, we'll have a way more accurate understanding of who the best player in the world is. And on top of that, the data reveals a lot about team play styles and what a team needs in order to win a championship.
Por essa razão, o Platum analisou o top 4 do Champions e alguns players seletos que se destacaram em 2023, como Buzz e Stacks da DRX, assim como o Cancan e o Chico da EDG, além de adicionar o EA por motivo de comparação, já que ele é considerado o melhor jogador de 2022.
Team play is a large part of what makes a good player great, but it's hard to measure how good a player's communication is with data. What we can look at is how much value they give their team and how critical they are to their success. The best players also need to boast strong fundamentals, so we'll take a look at how often players are getting trades and being traded. Finally, kills still do matter, but rating and KD give us no information about the impact of those kills and what they meant in a round. You've probably heard the term impact frag thrown around before, which implies that certain kills are more important than others. But what does that even mean? We're going to quantify the impact of every single frag to determine once and for all who had the most game-to-game impact in 2023. So that's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at how much value an individual player brings to their team. Recently, I saw this awesome post from Pablo on Twitter who does Valorant stats, which shows your probability of losing depending on which agent on your team dies first. For example, people normally have an assumption that if your controller dies first in attack, your win rate is significantly impaired. However, what his insights actually show are that initiators are much more important than controllers on attack, and any of them dying first with the exception of Fade significantly affects your chance to win.
O Platum aplicou essa mesma linha de pensamento aos dados do Masters e Champions, para ver quais jogadores diminuem mais a taxa de vitória do seu time quando morrem primeiro. Em outras palavras, o quão importante é para o time esse jogador estar vivo, e como isso afeta suas chances de ganhar o round. Podemos ver claramente o impacto do EA em 2022, onde sua morte diminuía a taxa de vitória da Optic em 79% naquele round, o que mostra o quão ele foi impactante.
But the most important players to keep alive this year were Calmanzin for Loud, Forsaken for Paper Rex, and finally Aspas for Loud. If any of these players were first blooded in any given round and were not traded, their team had more than an 80% chance to lose that round. It's really interesting to see two different Jet players on top teams in the world be at complete opposite ends of the spectrum, but this undoubtedly gives Aspas some credit for being an incredibly important player for Loud, and it doesn't necessarily mean he's a baiter as well, as we'll see later on in this video. Now we have some idea of how important individual players are for each team, but we can go even deeper than that and find out how much their individual performances correlate with their team's ability to win. In other words, how much does an individual's performance directly contribute to their team's success?
O Platum usa o Dirk como exemplo e mostra que a Fnatic ganha mais de 12 rounds por partida quando ele mata mais de 16, mas ganha 10 rounds por partida quando ele mata menos de 16. O número 16 é usado pois 15.2 foi a média de kills do Champions, ou seja, acima disso o jogador está acima da média e vice-versa. Destaquei os jogadores da Loud nessa imagem, onde podemos ver que o Les é o que traz mais rounds para a Loud em média. O Platum também analisa que pelo posicionamento dos jogadores na tabela é perceptível que o time da Loud é consistente e não precisa que um jogador se destaque para ganhar partidas.
Let's also take this chance to assess team fundamentals of each player by looking at trade statistics. The first graph shows the average number of trade kills each player is getting per game. Again, we're seeing Jing at the top with an average of 3.58 trades per game. We need to point out the non-duelists here like Chichu, Stax, and Ethan, meaning that they have top-tier team-fighting fundamentals. But being a well-rounded player means that you have to also know how to die in good positions as well. So this next graph shows how many of your deaths were traded by your team. And it's really quite impressive to see Jing at the top of this graph as well, showing that he is probably the best team fighter in the game and someone who knows to go in for his team, but also successfully trade his teammates. If you remember the first statistic we looked at, which showed that Aspas is the most important player to keep alive in a round, you may have thought he was just a baiter. But now we can see that Aspas has the second most traded deaths behind Jing, meaning he's definitely going in for loud and making sure to die in spots that are tradable. We should normally see the duelists at the top of this second graph looked at every single round outcome of all games played from Masters and Champions to determine the exact chances of winning every single combination. For example, the chance to win a 2v4 is about 9%, but the chance to win a 3v5 is 12%. These are all the probabilities for any given team to win in each of these scenarios. Now, with this data, we know that getting a kill and going from a 1v5 to a 1v4 only improves your team's chances of winning by 1%. Getting the first blood, bringing the round from a 5v5 to a 5v4, increases your team's chances of winning by 20%. Now we can assign a value for every single kill. But before we go on to calculate that for every player, we need to make an assumption on this data. We're going to assume that every single XV0 situation means a 100% win rate for the side with numbers. This is not entirely true, because there are rounds where the bomb could explode, causing attackers to win after they are already dead. But for the purposes of calculating impact, we can make this assumption. Okay, now we can quantify the exact impact of every single player and compare them to see who really had the most impact in 2023. I'll just briefly explain what I'm doing here so everyone understands the statistic a little bit better. I'm looking at every single kill that each player got in a game and calculating exactly how much each kill increased their team's chances of winning. For example, Jogamo kills Jing here, bringing the round from a 5v5 to a 5v4. Going by the graph I just showed on win percentages, this kill increased EG's chance at winning the round by 20%. So we count that Jogamo increased EG's win percentage by 20%, and we add up all the impact of their kills over the course of one game. Then we do this for every single game they played and average out the number to get our final value of game-to-game impact.
E aqui podemos ver a avaliação final que o Platum fez, onde vemos o Cined com números absurdos, onde ele sozinho por jogo quase trouxe 4 rounds para a Na'Vi. O Platum também destacou o Cloud da Giants e o Cancan da EDG, mesmo ele não fazendo parte do top 4 do Champions, pois ambos sozinhos trouxeram cerca de 3 rounds e meio para seus times por jogo. Também podemos ver que nenhum player do top 4 do Champions 2023 supera o impacto do Ye em 2022, mas podemos ver o Aspas como player de maior impacto em 2023. Mas vamos ver quem o Platum declarou como o melhor jogador de 2023.
I had to choose just a single player out of this entire list. I would have to choose Jing. For all the metrics we looked at, Jing was always comfortably in the top percentage. PaperX loses nearly 75% of all rounds where Jing dies first. They rely on Jing performing well to win games, as he earns 5.56 more rounds for PaperX when he performs well compared to when he performs poorly. He comes in third for most kill impact, and I personally have a soft spot for players who know how to trade and be traded, which is such an important fundamental skill. But in my opinion, you can make a very, very, very solid argument for any of these 4 players. At the end of the day, lifting the trophy for your team is what matters. So who cares who the best player is anyway? I want to leave off on this final graph, which starts with Ye's impact from 2022. When we look at this same impact metric for all players on Loud in 2022, when they won champs against Ye, not a single player on their team is even close to the amount of impact that Ye had. And you can imagine that there were many more impactful players than any individual player on Loud during that tournament. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's not who the best player is, but that being the best team in the world means that no one player can or should stand out.
Mas é isso, pessoal, deixa sua opinião sobre tudo isso aí nos comentários. Fica aqui o nosso agradecimento ao Platum por ter liberado nós trazermos esse vídeo. Aquele abraço, até o próximo.